The most dangerous betrayal is never the one you expect. It's the one that comes from the person you would have defended in front of everyone. You know exactly who I'm talking about. You can see their face right now. The person you stood up for when others had doubts. When people warned you, quietly, carefully, in the way people warn you when they don't want to be wrong but suspect they might be right, you dismissed it. You said, "You don't know them like I do." You said they've been through a lot. You said people are more complicated than that, and you were right. People are more complicated than that. That's exactly the problem. Because the betrayal, when it came, was not simple. It was not the betrayal of a villain. It was the betrayal of someone who genuinely cared about you, up until the moment caring about you became expensive. Up until the moment their interest and your interest stopped pointing in the same direction. And in that moment, with no announcement, with no visible decision, with nothing that could be named or confronted, they chose themselves. And you stood there trying to reconcile the person who had cared about you with the person who was doing this. They were the same person. That is the thing you have to understand before anything else in this video makes sense. The darkness in human nature is not somewhere else. It is not in strangers or enemies or the people you already knew to be dangerous. It is in the people who love you. It is in the people who mean well. It is in you. It is the quiet, consistent, entirely human tendency to choose yourself when the cost of choosing otherwise becomes real, and to tell a story afterward that makes the choice look like something else. This is not an accusation. It is a description. And once you can hear it as a description rather than an accusation, once you can see it clearly without needing it to be someone's fault, something changes in how you move through the world. Have you ever noticed how different people are when they need you versus when they don't? Think about the friend who called you every week when things were hard, when the relationship ended, when the job fell apart, when the anxiety made ordinary life feel impossible. You showed up, you listened, you canceled things to be available, you absorbed what they needed to release, and you did it genuinely, not as a transaction, not counting what you were giving, not keeping score, and then things got better for them. And somehow, you're not entirely sure when it happened. The calls became less frequent. The availability became more complicated. The person who needed you everywhere is now rarely anywhere. And when you're the one having a hard time, there is a version of them that shows up. But it's a smaller version. A version that has somewhere to be after an hour. A version that listens, but is already thinking about what to say rather than actually hearing what you're saying. You didn't lose the friendship. You lost the dynamic that made the friendship feel essential. Have you ever noticed what happens to certain people when you start doing well? The colleague who was your closest ally when you were both at the same level? Who celebrated the early wins genuinely? You could feel the genuineness, you're not imagining it. Who was invested in your success in the way that people are invested when your success doesn't threaten their position? And then you grew, faster than expected, into territory that started to feel close to theirs. And something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, it never is. Just a slight cooling, a new quality of professional correctness in their manner. Less information shared, more carefully. A new tendency to mention your mistakes in rooms where your wins have just been acknowledged. A subtle repositioning that you noticed before you could name it, felt before you could prove it. They didn't decide to change. They didn't sit down and calculate. The change was automatic, as instinctive as pulling your hand back from heat. Your growth became a threat their nervous system registered before their conscious mind had time to reason about it. And the relationship reconfigured itself around the threat before either of you realized it was happening. Have you ever been supported by someone right up until the moment your success threatened to surpass theirs? The partner who encouraged every dream from a safe distance, who was generous with enthusiasm when the dream was still hypothetical, who seemed to genuinely want the life you were building together. Until the life started to become real, until your success started to require something of them. A change in the balance, a shift in who needed whom, a new arrangement that was better for you but less comfortable for the story they had been telling themselves about who they were in relation to you. And the support became complicated. The encouragement acquired conditions. The person who wanted you to succeed started unconsciously doing the things that make success harder, not from malice, from the deep, pre-rational, entirely human fear that your thriving might cost them something they were not ready to lose. These are not exceptional stories. You have lived at least one of them. This is human nature. not at its worst, at its most ordinary. Machiavelli wrote that men are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers. Most people quote this as evidence that he was cynical, that he hated people, that his philosophy was the philosophy of someone who had been wounded and built a worldview to justify the wound. They are wrong. He was not cynical, he was observational, and the observation was precise. Think about the mechanics of gratitude. When someone helps you through something difficult, genuinely helps you at real cost to themselves, you feel something, a warmth, a debt, a genuine desire to reciprocate when the moment comes. And in that moment, you mean it. The gratitude is real, but gratitude is an emotion. And emotions are not permanent states. They are responses to conditions. And conditions change. The help that felt enormous when you were desperate feels smaller, as distance grows between you and the desperation. The person who saved you when you were drowning becomes, over time, simply a person, with their own complications, their own demands, their own needs that sometimes inconvenience you. The debt that felt sacred in the crisis becomes, in ordinary life, a weight. A reminder of a vulnerability you would rather not remember. This is not cruelty. This is how human memory and human emotion actually work. And what Machiavelli understood, what he documented with the specific precision of someone who had been on the wrong side of this pattern more than once, is that the person you help the most is rarely the person most likely to help you when you need it. Because the person you help the most is the person who has the strongest interest in forgetting how much they needed you. To remember the depth of the help would be to remember the depth of the helplessness, and most people would rather revise the past than carry that particular weight into the future. The gratitude fades, the interest remains, and the interest, when it conflicts with the memory of what is owed, wins. Not always, not with everyone, but often enough that building your life on the assumption of permanent gratitude is one of the most reliable ways to be left standing alone, wondering what happened to the people you gave the most to. There is a specific kind of wound that comes not from betrayal, but from the gap between what you believed about someone and what turned out to be true. It is not the wound of being hurt by an enemy. It is the wound of being hurt by your own judgment, the realization that you were not just wrong about them, you were wrong about the version of reality in which they were the person you believed them to be. And that wound goes deeper because it is not just about them. It is about you, about the part of you that needed to believe in the version you constructed, that looked at the available evidence and chose the interpretation that allowed you to keep trusting, keep investing, keep showing up in a way that felt right and turned out to be expensive. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote about it not to excuse those who betray or to blame those who trust, but to describe the structure of the thing as honestly as possible. Most people, he observed, are not bad. They are driven by fear, by need, by the calculations of self-interest that run continuously beneath the surface of every relationship, every alliance, every moment of apparent generosity. And the calculations are not always conscious. That is the part that makes them so difficult to defend against. The friend who disappears when you stop being useful does not decide to disappear. The decision made itself. The colleague who begins to undermine you when you grow does not plan the undermining. The plan runs itself. The partner who withdraws support when your success becomes threatening does not choose to withdraw. The withdrawal chooses itself, below the level of deliberate decision, in the deep self-protective logic of a consciousness that is always prioritizing its own survival. This is what darkness means in Machiavelli's sense. Not evil, not malice, not the theatrical villainy of someone who has decided to harm you. The quiet, consistent, almost mechanical operation of self-interest in people who are otherwise kind, otherwise good, otherwise people you would choose again if you could choose without knowing what you know now. The darkness is not a monster hiding behind the face of someone you trust. The darkness is the face. It is also the kindness. It is also the love. All of it is true simultaneously. And the tragedy is not that people are secretly evil. The tragedy is that they are exactly who they appear to be. And that who they appear to be contains always the seed of the choice that will hurt you when conditions make that choice the path of least resistance. So what do you do with this? Because the wrong answer, the answer that feels right but leads somewhere worse, is to close. To decide that if this is what people are, then the appropriate response is distance, withdrawal, the fortress psychology that protects you from betrayal by eliminating the vulnerability that makes betrayal possible. To stop trusting so completely that you stop being hurt so completely. This is the answer that Machiavelli is often read as recommending. He was not. What he was recommending, what the most careful reading of everything he wrote actually points toward, is discernment. The specific, earned, practiced capacity to see people as they are, rather than as you need them to be. And to relate to them from that seeing rather than from the story you have constructed about them. Discernment is not suspicion. Suspicion closes before it looks. Discernment looks, carefully, patiently over time, and then decides what is actually there. The suspicious person decides in advance that people cannot be trusted and looks for evidence to confirm it. They find it because evidence for almost any belief is available if you look hard enough. And they protect themselves from betrayal by protecting themselves from intimacy, which means they also protect themselves from everything that intimacy makes possible, from genuine connection, from the specific kind of love that requires vulnerability to be real, from the relationships that could have changed them. The discerning person does not decide in advance. They observe. They watch how people behave when it costs them something. They notice the gap between what people say and what people do. Not to catch them in a lie, but to understand who they actually are when the performance meets the pressure. They update their understanding of a person based on evidence over time, rather than on first impression or on the version of themselves that person presents when they want to be liked. This is the practice. And it is a practice, not an instinct, not a talent, not something you either have or don't have. It is something you build slowly, by paying attention in the way that most people choose not to pay attention, because paying attention means seeing things that are easier not to see. Observation is the first discipline, not observation in the paranoid sense, scanning every interaction for signs of threat. Observation in the patient sense, watching how someone treats people who can do nothing for them, watching what they do with information you share, whether it stays with them or finds its way back to you in a form you did not authorize. Watching how they respond when your circumstances change, when you need more than you can give, when you succeed in ways that alter the balance, when you become something different than what they signed up for. These things take time to see. That is the point. The most important information about anyone is not available in the first impression. It is not available in the first months of a friendship or a working relationship. It is available only in the moments when the relationship is tested, when something is at stake, when choosing you costs them something, when the easy thing and the right thing are different. Watch those moments, not with suspicion, with attention, with the patient, clear-eyed, non-judgmental willingness to see what is actually there rather than what you hope is there. And then, this is the part that requires the most courage, act on what you see. Not dramatically. Not with confrontation or accusation or the announcement that you have discovered something about them. Simply by adjusting, by recalibrating how much of yourself you extend in a direction that has shown you, over time and through evidence, that the extension will not be honored. This is limits, not walls. A wall keeps everyone out equally, regardless of what they have shown you. A limit is specific. It is shaped by evidence. It says, I have watched how you handle what I give you, and I am going to give you what that handling deserves. No more and no less. This is not coldness. This is the most respectful thing you can do, to relate to people based on who they have actually shown you they are, rather than on who you need them to be. And paradoxically, it creates better relationships. Because the people who are worth trusting, the ones who show up consistently, who honor what you share, who remain when the balance shifts and your usefulness changes, those people will receive more of you under this framework, not less, because you will not have depleted your capacity to trust on people who were consuming it without honoring it. Machiavelli was not trying to teach you to distrust people. He was trying to teach you to see them, to see the friend who shows up only when they need something, and love them for what they are, a person who has not yet learned to be present except from need, rather than for what you wish they were. To see the colleague whose support has a ceiling set at exactly the height of your success relative to theirs, and relate to them accordingly, professionally, warmly, without giving them access to the parts of you that they will use against you without quite meaning to. To see the partner whose love is real, and whose fear is also real, and whose fear, when it conflicts with your growth, will consistently win. And to decide with clear eyes whether you can build something with someone whose love has that particular shape. This is not the end of connection. It is the beginning of honest connection. The relationships built on accurate seeing are the only ones that can survive what real relationships are eventually asked to survive. The changes, the disappointments, the moments when interest and loyalty point in opposite directions, and someone has to choose. The goal was never to stop trusting people. The goal was to stop trusting blindly. Seeing human nature clearly does not make you hopeless. It makes you impossible to deceive. Because the person who sees clearly, who has done the patient work of observation and discernment, and the difficult updating of their understanding when the evidence requires it, is not the person who gets blindsided. Not because nothing bad ever happens to them, but because they are not operating on a version of reality that requires other people to be other than they are. They extend trust where trust is warranted. They withhold it where it isn't. They love people as they are rather than as they need them to be. And when someone shows them who they are, through the choices they make when those choices cost something, they believe them. The first time. Not because they are cold or suspicious or have given up on people, because they understand that seeing someone clearly, really clearly, without the distortion of your own needs, is the deepest form of respect available. It says, I see you. Not the version I constructed, not the version that fits the story I'm telling about my own life. You. And relating to people from that seeing is not cynicism. It is the highest form of honesty. Machiavelli spent his life watching people choose themselves at the moment when choosing otherwise became real. He documented it not to condemn them, but to understand them. And the understanding, applied with discernment rather than bitterness, produces something that mere innocence never can. It produces wisdom, not the wisdom of someone who has been broken by what they discovered. The wisdom of someone who looked directly at what is true, about people, about human nature, about the darkness that coexists with every genuine kindness, and chose, with full awareness of what they were choosing, to remain in the world anyway. Eyes open, heart intact, impossible to deceive. That is what Machiavelli was actually trying to give you. Not armor, not distance, not the cold satisfaction of expecting the worst and being right. The ability to see clearly, and from that clarity to build something real,